A young civil engineer who quit 3 cushy jobs to return to his village in Odisha and set up an innovative school for kids. A teacher in Karnataka who turns into a bus driver every day to ensure that kids in his school don't have to drop out. A woman in Delhi who uses creative education and art innovation to empower girls in a slum. We at The Better India come across numerous such stories of change makers who are going out and changing the face of education in India. And today we are here together to celebrate some of such change makers from across the country. Welcome to the 5th episode of Happy Furniture Projects, an initiative by Pepperfry and The Better India, as a part of which we aim to shine the spotlight on organizations that are working at the grassroots to create change. Over the past few days, we have been meeting up and hosting such curated discussions to discuss various issues that India is facing. Over the past few days, we have curated some discussions around different issues like these in various Pepperfry studios across Bengaluru and Mumbai. I am here with 3 incredible people who are working day in and day out to ensure that children in India are getting quality education no matter where they come from. Let me quickly introduce you to the panelists. I have with me Sandeep Rai, who is the Chief of City Operations with Teach for India. Born and raised in the US, Sandeep moved to India in 2009, where he helped launch Teach for India's first fellowship cohort. Since then, he has been instrumental in building Teach for India's operations. His journey as an educator came to life when he started as a secondary science instructor in Washington, D.C. for Teach for America. His commitment is driven by his unwavering belief that poverty, regardless of circumstances, should not dictate destiny. I also have with me Anil Pradhan. Anil was named among the top 10 student innovators in India and is also the winner of National Youth Icon Awards 2018. He's a civil engineering graduate. He quit 3 cushy jobs and returned back to his village in Odisha to set up an innovative school for kids. International Public School for Rural Innovation was built with all the scholarship money that he won over the years. We'll talk more about Anil's story in a bit. We also have with me Agatha. Agatha is the founder of Amcha Ghar, an NGO that provides a residential home for orphan girls rescued from the streets of Mumbai. Amcha Ghar believes in providing education at the grassroots level with the aim of empowering students and of eradicating poverty, unemployment, and also child labor. Thank you so much everyone for joining me today, for giving me your time to get this discussion started around how the face of education is being changed with the help of so many organizations that are coming together, right? So Sandeep, we'll start with you. Every year there's a period of time when newspapers are filled with reports on how students in India are way behind their reading levels. So there is news about 50% of students from class 5 and 25% of students from class 8 from government schools across the country cannot read with the difficulty level of class 2. So keeping this in mind, can you share the collective responsibility of NGOs? There's so many NGOs working in the field of education in the country. What's the collective responsibility? How can they work together to ensure that they are creating change beyond the classrooms as well, creating change in policy, making sure that there are infrastructure required to make sure that this gap is filled that we talk about year after year?
Right. So it's good to be here, so thank you for that. Yeah. And it's good to be sitting here with both of you. I think before we can talk about what it means to collectively come together, we need to ask ourselves what's underlying that. And those are some pretty daunting statistics that you just read out, right? You have statistics that are telling us that 76% of kids are dropping out before they get to 10th. You have an economy that is telling us that you can basically do nothing unless you make it past 10th for the vast majority of India kids. You have a system that's telling us that people are years behind where they need to be. And if I were to sit here and if I were to ask every person here, like what's underlying that reality, the truth is that if we were to take a whiteboard, we could probably fill it up with reasons. Some of you might actually say it's a really poor curriculum. Before this, Anil and I were talking about training teachers is incredibly tough. In addition to that, we might also say it's technology, or it's infrastructure, or it's policies, or it's the 10th grade examination. And the truth is that we could go on and on, probably for a couple of hours. But the question is, what's really underlying all of that? And I think what I've grown to believe is that trying to choose one of those areas to fix is a lot like guesswork. So if I were to say, hey, I just want to fix technology, the truth is that I'm searching for a silver bullet that doesn't exist, right? So I can aim at technology, but if I just fix technology without fixing the quality of teachers, without fixing the quality of curriculum, we're still going to be in the same spot, which is a large reason why we're still here, talking about this educational crisis that just doesn't seem to be going away.
Yeah.
And I think whenever you look beneath all of those issues, what you find is a common denominator of people. And what you find is that in India today, we face what is arguably the greatest brain drain the country has ever faced. When you talk to young people today, by and large, young people are choosing every possible career except for education.
Yeah.
Very seldom will you find a young person today that says, hey, like I'm gonna put my hand up and I'm gonna go lead a school or I'm gonna go teach. They're choosing everything but education. And I think what that's resulted to over the past couple of decades is this enormous dearth of talent in the landscape. And when you look at across all of those issues, what you'll discover is that there's just this giant lack of leadership. And there is this lack of talent. And that's compounded over the course of many decades.
Right.
And so now we're looking at this, what seems like this intractable mess that just can't be solved, that's saying there's these dozens of issues that we actually have to fix before we can fix the educational crisis. And what I would argue is that trying to choose one of those is guesswork. Recognizing what underlies that and trying to solve that is going to lead us to a lot more.
Right.
And what underlies that is a lack of people. And so the question is, how do you fix a lack of people? Well, the truth is that we have to change the conversation about what it means to get into education.
Right.
We have to figure out how to inspire and accelerate and catalyze people to not choose the corporate career, to not go into any other career, but to say, hey, I'm going to actually join and lead a career in education. And I think once we can start to do that, I think we can start to change the equation. But I don't think that's a collective of organizations. I think that's a collective of people. I think that takes a country actually waking up to say, this is a problem we have to solve. And this is not a problem that the government's going to solve. This is not a problem that an NGO is going to solve. This is a problem that we're going to solve. And it starts by us saying, this is the number one most important issue of today.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Anil, I was reading about you and I have read how you used to cycle 12 kilometers every day to reach school when you were a young kid, and how you used to do a lot of innovation and jugaad to make sure that you were reaching school and getting the kind of education that you deserve. So please talk about the inspiration behind starting this school and all the life experiences that have led you to be here.
Actually, when I was a kid, I used to just cycle 12 kilometers away from my home to one of the schools there in Cuttack.
Okay.
So it was very difficult to just cycle this and reach that place. And my father, he was not there in, he is now in CRPF. He is a head constable there.
Okay.
But when I was a kid, he was just a tailor.
Okay.
So we don't have funding and all that stuff to get to a very good school and get a very good education. So it was very difficult for me to get that. And while going to the school, my cycle, it used to broke down. I have to fix the chains, and I was very fascinated about technology and engineering, basically engineering, when I used to do that stuff. So I just innovated that how this can be done.
Okay.
So I just added extra more axle. I just went to the welder. I told that I just want to make something different, and I told that this whole thing. So it was like, it was a very good thing that happened to me. But when my father, he got a job in CRPF, so we went to Bhopal.
Okay.
So from there I got a very decent education, and from there I get to know about how I can move forward. So when I was a young kid, I went for this programming, I went for robotics. So when I was in, I just remember one of the story that I was there in C++ class when I was in class 8th, and I was studying with B.Tech students. So they were like, "Ye bachcha kiska kho gaya hai? Who is here?" Okay. So they were like, C++ is so tough. So could you learn that? So after 1 year, I came up with this C++. I learned it, and then next time when I was there in the class, I used to teach few of them.
Oh, okay.
So that happened to me in Bhopal. So after that, when I was in engineering, I was like, I was working with various organizations. Like I did projects for Tata with L&T, ISRO, and NASA.
Okay.
So I was basically a civil engineer by degree, but by passion, I'm an engineer.
Okay.
So I was into mechanical engineer, I was into welding, I was into electronics engineer. So we made Asia's first student rocket.
Right.
Okay, and it was like I was into everything, but the thing was how I made an impact. I was having a problem when I was in the village. The same problem is there now also.
Correct.
But who solved it? Nobody. So I chose to start a school there.
Right.
So it was not one village. That the name of the place is Boilis Moja. It is an island of 42 villages.
Okay.
So this is not the problem with a single village. The problem is 42 villages.
Okay.
So if I can start something for them. So this is not a school. I came up idea with an innovation school.
Right.
How to bring science, technology, innovation in these students. So so there was a problem with education system as well, and there's a problem with the quality as well.
Right.
So how to solve it?
Okay.
So we get into an innovation school.
Great.
So when then we changed the methodology, so method of teaching.
Right.
How can we teach students in a different way? Education now, if you tell a student to go to school, it was like, sir, मैं नहीं जाऊँगा. Why? But sir, because it's very tough. I can't score good marks. So it's about marks. It's not about the quality.
Right.
If you are not loving something, then you can't get it.
Correct.
If the student will love it, he will get it.
Right.
And he will only tell that I'll go to the school. I'll get that. So I started this school, and now students are there quite happy.
Right.
So happily they come, they do lot of stuffs there, and now few of the people they told me, Anil, tu kya kar raha hai? You are leaving 3 jobs. You are leaving Tata. You are leaving this. You are leaving that. So will be worth it? You are going from this level. You are going to village. Will you? Can you prove it?
Yeah.
Sure. Why not?
Yeah.
There was a time then when people told me that this project can't be done by an engineering student.
Yeah.
When we did that, why can't this be done by an engineering student?
Yeah. Yeah.
And now it's done.
Yeah.
We are growing, and students are really.
Yeah.
My happiness is when I see students.
Yeah.
They are coming, they are making projects, and now they have been recognized nationally and internationally.
Right. So much in line with what Sandeep was also saying of people not accepting teaching as a job of prestige.
Yes.
Yeah, it's like, why are you leaving something to do that? Agatha, so Amchagar is working on intervention, rescuing, or also rehabilitation of young girls, and then you're also providing education. So you have seen that gap that we were talking about from a very close and personal level. So please talk about some of the biggest lessons that you have come across over the years, because I think those lessons could help other organizations that are working on similar grounds. What can they learn from that?
I'm basically from Rajasthan, from a Rajput family, where there was no education. So the whole gap of education system comes from there, where my parents allowed us to send for education, the girl child for education. When I came to Amchagar also I started a project when I found a girl child sexually abused on the street. So then I thought, no, I had to pick the girls and bring it to my own house, and I began the Amchagar. Then I realized that this child should be given education, because when I was educating, I was in Hindi medium. I used to be the person who used to, take the cows and the bakris and the goats and all sorts of things. And the parents are given that, like, you need to go for education. So the passion for education was already from the beginning.
Okay.
And once you come back to Bombay and you see the girls on the streets, and I said, no, this is my moral responsibility, I should do it for them something. And then the question mark was to me, that is a Hindi medium, Marathi medium, or English medium. The whole process came, I need to give them English medium, because if the child comes to my home at the orphanage, 3 years old, and the child stays for 10 to 15 years, again the child will be the same problem where he can't speak before the crowd.
Right.
And so we give them English medium education. Now I'm realizing that not only English medium education, but along with the English medium education, we need to give the children the skill development. Or the child, by the 10th or 12th child should know which field I need to enter.
Right.
So that the child can be built up into that.
Right. Sure. Okay. Sandeep, so in line with that, we began talking about the problems, and one of the things that you listed was education, teacher training. So, like, we talk a lot about the gaps in education. Like I was saying, every year we talk a lot about how students are not at that level. But we don't talk as much about the training of teachers, the kind of equipment that is needed to make sure that there is better infrastructure for teacher training. So, if you could shed some light on the necessity to ensure that teachers are well equipped with the resources to make sure that they're going into the classrooms and giving their best, how that can be done, how important that is.
Yeah. It's incredibly important.
Yeah.
But so there was this 2008 McKinsey study that came out, and what they concluded at the end of this, and they were trying to conclude what is it that's actually going to shift education within a system, and what they concluded at the end was that your teacher is the single greatest investment that you can make to be able to shift a child's life. All of the other pieces that surround it, from curriculum to technology to infrastructure, matter a fraction of a percentage as much as that teacher, the person standing in the front of that classroom.
Yeah.
And I think step one is recognizing that. I think step one is recognizing that the teacher is the single greatest investment that we can make. All of the other data surrounding that is mixed. Lots of studies have been done on, all sorts of how do you improve teacher effectiveness? What if you were to basically provide better curriculums? And I'm in no way saying that those are not valuable, but I don't think that they begin to compare with the investment that you get whenever you make sure that the person standing in the front of that classroom is the best person you can find. And as I said before, I think it starts by recognizing that reality and really accepting that reality. So what stands in the way of that?
Yeah.
And you could argue many things stand in the way of that, right? But I think it starts by saying, are we attracting the best people we can find to get into the profession? And are we making sure that we're getting the best teachers in front of classrooms? And I think that's step one. And I think that means that we have to start by making teaching fundamentally more aspirational. I still remember the conversation that I had with my parents many years ago. Whenever I was supposed to be a doctor, I basically was a couple of months away actually. I had basically, my sister used to read to me out of medical school books when I was 4 and 5 years old.
Oh, wow.
And so it was almost this predetermined reality that I would go to medical school. And so whenever I had to sit down with my family when I was thinking about not going to medical school and say, hey, I'm not going to medical school. Instead, I'm going to go teach in a low-income school for 2 years. And I'm not going to probably go to medical school ever again. I mean, we didn't talk for 6 months, right? And I think that's reflective of the fact that we just don't see teaching as an aspirational career, right? And I think we have to figure out how to fundamentally change that. And then once we're able to change it, once we're able to basically get the best people we can find into classrooms, then I think it means pushing everything out of their way so that they can do one thing, and that's focusing on teaching and learning. And I think that means from administrative demands to time outside of the classroom to making sure we're maximizing the number of hours that teachers have with kids. And then once we can do that, I think magic happens. I think it's about getting the best people we can find and then getting everything out of their way so they can do one thing, and that's focus on teaching and learning.
I think that step one can be done with a lot of conversations, parents, children, everyone, a lot of conversation, and even in schools, making teaching very aspirational for kids to look up to.
Exactly.
Great. So, Anil, when you were talking about innovations, right? So I was reading how you're using innovations in school. So one of the examples was like children use these plastic bottles to grow plants and see how that process is. And in the process, they also understand how plastic bottles can be reused and not sent into the landfills. So could you talk about some such examples of how you're using innovation in school to make sure that learning becomes fun and creative?
Yeah. So this is one of the examples of the projects that has been implemented. But I'll talk about few methodologies that we have been using. Okay. So the complete methodologies we have innovated with the help of students from different IITs and NITs. So I'll talk about the methodologies. Okay. So we just can't talk about science, technology and innovations to every kid. If there is a kid in UKG or LKG, we can't talk about science and technology, but we can talk about innovations. So the thing was, people are like, how can you teach them innovation? We can't teach them innovation, but we can have some innovative methodologies to make them learn.
Right.
So for example, I will talk about a very small apparatus, handwriting apparatus. Okay.
Okay.
So you may be thinking that handwriting apparatus must be like a very good big apparatus in which the students will write and they will learn about handwriting. But it was not like that.
Okay.
So there is a plank, and in that plank we just put one needle over it.
Okay.
And we'll just give the student a thread, and we'll tell them just put this thread in that needle.
Right.
And you can use any permutation and combination. You can use these 2 fingers, you can use these 3 fingers, these 5 fingers, anything. So the only combination which will be good, and the only combination by which that child will be able to put that thread in that needle is this.
Right.
Okay. And you can't teach a kid, but like this is a pen, and you just hold like this,
Right.
and you will get the force. You can just tell them that this is pressure, this is force, this is the maximum force, this is the minimum angle. You can't teach them, but you can teach them by this method.
Yeah.
That if you can do this with a thread, you can do this with a pen, and this is the reason why you're using. So so this happened. So these kind of innovations we have implemented.
Yeah.
Okay. And if I'll talk about innovation in methodologies. Okay.
Yeah.
So in methodologies, what we did is we implemented few of the classes. Okay, we added classes like Tod Phod Jod.
Okay.
Okay, Kabad se Jugaad,
Right.
Zor ka Jhatka. So these kind of classes have been implemented. Like Zor ka Jhatka, in that class you will be teaching about electronics and electrical and electronics engineering. Okay,
Right.
so students will come, they will program, they will burn the circuits, and they will do a lot of stuff like that. And in Tod Phod Jod, what they will do is when we are a kid, when I was a kid, what I used to do is I used to just unscrew every device that I have in my house. I was much curious about what's inside. Okay, so what I did is when I was a kid, I just unscrewed the door of my refrigerator, and I was unable to screw it up.
Yeah.
So when my mother came, actually during Sundays, my dad and my mother, they used to go for shopping.
Yeah.
So that was the best time to unscrew and see how the thing is working. So till they came, I didn't fix it up. So when my mother she went to the fridge to keep the vegetables in. So when it opened it, the gate came out.
Okay.
So I don't want that this should happen with every household, every other kid.
Yeah.
So I just implemented this Tod Phod Jod, in which I have many devices, many apparatus, household apparatus, and the students they can come and they can see how this is working. Okay. And the Kabad se Jugaad is like we have many waste materials like plastic bottles, everything, and parts of automobiles and from scraps and everything. Students will come, they will make something best out of that.
Agatha, I want you to look back, and I'll open this question for everyone. Look back to all the years of work that you have done, and either pick one case study, one story of change that has happened because of the work that you were doing and that has touched your heart and always stayed close to you, or talk about the overall impact that your organization has created in the years.
Yeah, there's like 23 years of journey.
Yeah.
A lot of girls have come where they have reached.
Right.
It's really satisfactory.
Yeah.
I still remember one of the students. She was 4 years old, and she had seen her mother committing suicide in front of her eyes.
Okay.
And thereafter, this child came to our home. And and this was why the commitment that her mother has committed suicide, because they had this much place in that small jhopadas in the slum. And when they used to go home, she used to have the bed like this, and the children to sleep down because that was only space.
Okay.
And for that, there was a fight in the family. And the mother committed suicide in front of her eyes. And when this child came to me, and she was, you can imagine how she was emotionally broke up. And slowly we worked upon with her. It really took me 3 years, like how we'll get through and how she became close to the human beings. Like, she had a distaste for everybody, like, for male figure, she was so scared of, like, because of uncle, her mother got suicided the kid. And then slowly this child came up in her studies after 3 years.
Yeah.
They had to practically hold and then teach her and that. She completed her 9th, completed her 10th. Of course, 10th she could not complete with a formal education. Then we had done it with the NIOS. Then she went to 12th. Then we sent her to our own school.
Right.
And people used to call her teacher, Archana teacher. And then the word teacher was so satisfactory for her
Yeah.
that people are calling me teacher. And then she did her 12th, she did her ECCED course, and she was best teacher of the year.
Awesome.
And now that she is married, she had 2 kids, and 2 kids are just twins. And I said, she is the person who can look after those 2 twins girls, you know. It's like, that's a like very achieving story for me, like from
That's
where
super.
the child has come to this family.
Yeah.
And the family also has accepted it.
The whole curve. Sandeep, you have something to add to that?
Yeah, a very touching story. Every day I think I'm reminded of stories that, one, remind me of the truth of what we do, and just how incredibly challenging this work is. And every day I'm honestly reminded of stories that just remind me of how incredible the hope is. And I think it's the contrast between both of those stories that makes me troubled, but also just gives me a lot of hope. I'll never forget my time in Jahangirpuri, which is a slum in Delhi. And it's actually one of Delhi's largest slum populations. When you go into Jahangirpuri, you realize that these families, hundreds of thousands of them, live within literally 300-400 meters of what is the city's largest dumping ground. And so when you're in this slum, you can basically feel and smell the stench of just a dumping ground where literally the entire city's trash is being dumped right here. And I was going and chatting with a couple of kids that we teach, and I landed up at the home of this little girl named Adhika. And when you start to talk to Adhika, you realize there is this smile about her. It's almost this effervescence that whenever you talk to her, it just lights up the room and it puts you at ease. And she's about 12 years old. But whenever you talk to her, you also realize there is this immense intensity that underlies her. It's the same intensity that gets her fellows to actually, her teachers, to call her the little Malala of India. And you realize they call her that because she's this incredibly profound child. And she carries this intensity that feels like this weight. And the more I'm sitting there chatting with her in this little tiny room of hers, where she and 4 of her family members share this space, you realize that that intensity is because of the fact that she's witnessed more violence than any 12-year-old should ever have to witness. You realize that intensity is because of the fact that when she was 8 years old, she was sexually assaulted. You realize that intensity is because of the fact that over the past 6 months, she and her father have been arguing day and nights about whether or not she should stay in school. And her father's sitting right next to me, and I look over at her father, and I kind of incredulously ask him, why would you pull her out of school? Like, why won't you keep her in? And he turns back at me and he basically says, look, he says, when you go and visit that school, go and spend one day in the shoes of the kids that are there. And you will see that what my child is getting is worse than anything else she could be getting somewhere else. And he says, I have a choice right now. I can keep her in the school where I know she's basically getting nothing. In fact, I know it's pulling her back. Or I can put her in a madrasa where maybe she's not going to get academics, but she's going to get value. She's going to get so much more. And I walked out of that house that day thinking, I walked in thinking this choice was so simple. Of course you put her in school. And I think what that made me realize was that we just have to make sure that our schools are able to deliver on their most fundamental promise to kids, which is to keep them safe and is to give them the education that they need and deserve. She's unfortunately dropped out. And that was a child that we had taught for 6 years. And that's the reality. And those are stories that I hear every single day that just remind me that there is this immense truth to what we do, and it is that we have such a long ways to go before we're able to make this work for all of India's kids. And the truth is that our system today is failing the vast majority of India's kids. And then there are stories of hope. 2 or 3 kilometers from Adhika is a guy named Tarun. about 10 years ago, Tarun was working for a company called Hindustan Lever. And after working there for a couple of years, before that he was at Bits Pilani. A couple of years in, he had basically been promoted several times. He was rising in many ways, right? And I think he basically woke up one morning and he said, this is just not what I want to be doing. I'm just stuck in this rat race, and this is not the life that I would envision myself having. And so he quit.
Okay.
And he applied to teach for India. He got accepted, and he ended up teaching for 2 years in this really low-income private school in Pune. He had an impact that was beyond belief on those 35 kids that he taught during those 2 years. And he faced challenges that were immense. But at the end of those 2 years, he said, you know what, like, I thought I was going to do this for 2 years, but I've just seen way too much. And he realized that those 2 years had impacted him possibly far more than he had impacted those 35 kids.
Right.
And he had a choice again. He said, okay, my fellowship is done. I can go back to my company, or I can continue working in education. Today, Tarun, just a couple of kilometers from where Adhika lives, runs an organization called Indus Action. And what they do is they're focusing on trying to make sure that low-income kids across the country have access to the best quality education they can find.
Yeah.
And so they do a lot to lobby the government, they do a lot to lobby schools. And that's the immense hope. And the truth is at Teach for India, we have about 4,000 of these alumni like Tarun that are out there trying to basically better impact kids across the country. So I think it's the truth and the hope.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also something that keeps you moving forward day after day to just complete the long journey that's there.
100%.
Yeah. Yeah. Anil?
Yeah, I have many stories,
Yeah.
but I'll just select 2 or 3 and I'll tell you. We have one open classroom, a classroom without walls.
Okay.
Without the 4 walls. So in that we send students to people, and they will do a survey. They will have a case study. The 4th and 5th class students, they will have a case study, and they will get to know about the problems and all.
Okay.
So one fine day, one of the students came to me and asked me, sir, RTI kaun tha? So what is RTI? I asked him, who told you about RTI? I didn't tell you anything about RTI. Sir, you told about that survey. I was doing the survey. I searched in the internet, and I have a jhuggi. So, and I am underprivileged. I have a BPL. How to get this? How to get that? I want a home. I want a pakka home. My father should get. Why isn't he getting? A 4-year, like a 4th class student, he is a 9-year-old or 8-year-old guy. He asked me, what is RTI?
Yeah.
Then I told him, just Google search. He Google searched everything. He get to know about everything. Then he came to me, sir, email ID नहीं बनाना आता है. Sir, email केमिति बनी वो कौन तू? So sir, email ID कैसे होता है? So I gave him that, do something like that. And asked me, sir, I can't draft the complete thing, but I know that I have this BPL card. You just take the photograph and please help me. So I helped him out. He got a letter and all, and then his father got something like 70,000 or something like that to make a home. So I was quite happy that I didn't do this thing. I did something else. And as a result, this is changing.
Yeah.
So now I get to know that I am not literating them, I am educating them. That makes me happy.
Those are really inspiring messages that can inspire so many people who are watching us, our audience, the organizations that are working in this field, as I said, and who can take this long journey together, and we can reach a stage where all kids in India are getting quality education. Thank you so much for joining us. Before I close, I'd like to inform that our partner in this endeavor is Pepperfry, and they are helping both your organizations with furniture, whatever little help they can give, that will reach the organization where your setups are. So I would just request Sandeep to pass on this gift certificate, this one to Agatha.
Great.
Thank you.
And this to Anil.
Thank you.
And this, Sandeep, is a token of thanks from
Great.
our side for all the
Thank
great
you
work
so
that you are
much.
doing. Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for joining us.
Thank you.